What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a really awesome episode with Corey Baker. He's been on the podcast before, back in the good old days. Corey is an Ableton Certified Trainer. He also produces under the name Kill Paris and started his new project, Hobbie Sound. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and he currently lives in Austin, Texas. He's worked with a lot of artists that I also really enjoy, like Zedd, Illenium, Griz, Gramatik, Dillon Francis, Big Gigantic. The list keeps going. Corey's a great guy. We had a really fun conversation. I highly recommend you listening all the way through because he and I nerd out about some of our favorite plugins and workflows and hacks and all that good stuff. We also talk about acoustic treatment. He shares some really interesting insights about psychedelic meditation therapy and how he has been scoring music for a meditation app that you might check out. There's links in the show notes to follow Corey and a lot of the things we talk about in this episode, so make sure you go and click that. Quick shameless plug, if you want to join the newsletter, get new updates when episodes come out and free packs and other things and goodies I'm sending out, go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. Also, wherever you're streaming the podcast, if you could hit follow or like or leave a review if you don't hate me, then I would appreciate that as well. Much love to everybody. The beginning of this episode picks up with Corey and I sharing failed attempts at doing DIY acoustic treatment in our own studios. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy. On it.
Yeah, so it's just this cheap is like $30 for like a pack of like 100 or something of this stuff. So I ended up getting like 4 of them because it's wow. I hate spending money on like acoustic treatment because it's literally just foam and it's like silly. But they come with these little like circle adhesive things that are like really, really great. But to use those, that's what takes the most time on putting them up because you have to take time to like, you know, use a knife and kind of like get off that little plastic cover that goes over the adhesive part on both sides and then press it and then do that. So I thought I outsmarted it and I was like, oh, well, I have this like double-sided Gorilla Tape that I'll just like basically measure it out, do the lines, and then like where 2 of the pieces like going vertically intersect, then you just have one line of tape right there. But it's worked well, but then the pieces just keep falling down like every other day. So
yeah, I bet you were really proud of yourself though for a moment, because I was. After I had everything set up, I was like, this looks great, and then slowly I can hear like the gaff tape on these plastic sheets I made just slowly peeling off the walls, and I get anxiety every time I hear that sound.
Yeah. No, I feel that. That sucks, man.
The joys of not like owning your own home and trying to set up acoustics in a rental home. Yeah. It's a good time. Have you seen the acoustic panels that Output released like a couple months ago? Yeah, they've been pushing them really hard. I'm really curious what they sound like. If anybody listening knows what they sound like or has tried them, please message me. Let us know. But it looks dope. Here, I could share the screen real quick. They look real interesting. I've been thinking about investing in them someday because at a price point, it's not too bad. You can see this. They have like different types. They have bass traps and diffusers and absorbers, but they look kind of pretty. They've got a bunch of holes in them.
It looks like the Ableton homepage.
It like does. It really does. Like the classic Ableton aesthetic setup that you see in everybody blog post. Yeah, this is cool. It's endorsed by a couple legit people. Anyway, yeah, we could talk about acoustics for a while. There's a guy named Dennis Foley from Acoustic Fields who created these monstrous bass cabinets. They're called acoustic diaphragmatic absorbers. I think I said that right. It's a big word.
Yeah.
But it's full of carbon and sand and like other patented stuff that he wouldn't tell me. But they were like $1,300 a piece, and I had 2 of them. You're supposed to put them behind your speakers, between the speakers and the wall. This guy was legit. Like, he's worked with Capitol Records. He made millions in New York City doing soundproofing for high-end executive level offices and like giant skyscrapers. So I gave him a try, and I was blown away, like with how well these things worked. But they weighed 350 pounds each. And I'm like moving to Denver across the country. So I was like, hey, just found another friend, sold it to him. But,
it's funny, all this like acoustic talk. When I lived in Boulder, I had hired this dude, Chris, who worked at like the Guitar Center that's there in Westminster, I think. It's like halfway. because there's a Guitar Center in downtown Denver, and then the other one is like halfway between Boulder and Denver. So I had met this guy there, and he was like the real nerdy, soft-spoken type that had some kind of crazy algorithmic sound treatment software running on his whatever those like ThinkPad laptops, like old school.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, so I don't remember how much it cost, but he basically built all these panels and did like this whole like flying thing like on the ceiling, and it was like really dope. But what I found, basically it was too much sound treatment, because like then you would walk in the room and shut the door, and it like felt like you're in one of those like isolation rooms or something. And then because I've moved several times like since then, basically with every move I've gotten rid of a few of those panels and a few of those panels like every time. And then now I think I just have 3 and then one big like bass trap thing. But yeah, like moving, like you always like dream of like your perfect studio with like, oh, it's got like the perfect setup. You got like all this stuff, this cool furniture, like great sound treatment. But then it's like, if you got to pick up and move, you're like, oh my God, what did I do?
I mean, soundproofing is such a tricky, slippery slope because there's so many variables. The size of your room, what's in your room, type of speakers you have. It's a lot. I think outsourcing it to somebody who really knows what they're doing is helpful, and if you aren't super familiar.
Yeah.
Not you, but people listening. Yeah, definitely. I actually found this random article, not to go on another tangent, but I thought it was really interesting. It's called White Torture, and it was used by, I guess, like the CIA, and it's pretty common in Iran, I guess, where it's like a completely soundproof holding cell, and if you stay in there long enough, like you'll go insane from sensory deprivation.
I feel like I'm in pain right now just thinking about that situation and
That'd
being
be rough.
in that. It's like kind of the worst nightmare. I was actually thinking about that today. I was thinking about just like really bad gigs and stuff. And this one bad gig that I had in New Orleans, like the hotel room didn't have any windows. It reminded me, like in retrospect, it reminded me of in Ex Machina. You ever seen that movie?
Classic,
so it's like, yeah. So like the dude is in that like concrete like room, and it like simulates as if there's like sunlight. But then like he kind of figures out, he's like, oh no, it's like we're like deep in the ground or like some shit. And just thinking about that situation, I was like, oh my God, like it gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about being isolated in a space like that, and especially no sound. It's like,
as somebody who's claustrophobic, I'm getting anxiety just thinking about that movie again.
Same.
In other news, you're in Denver now. Or I'm sorry, not Denver, Austin. You moved from Denver to Austin just in time for me to move to Denver. So great timing. Yeah. I'm like, hey man, I emailed you. I was like, I'm here. Let's hang out. You're like, hey, I'm in Austin now. I was like, cool. Awesome.
Cool, dude.
So how is it? How's Austin?
Austin's great, man. We moved the end of May and kind of went through, I don't want to kind of get into it, it's kind of a long story, but we got into a weird situation with the first place that we signed a lease for here in Austin, and then we're kind of displaced basically for like a month until we found this place, but then we couldn't move into here until like mid-June. Okay. So we've kind of been settled, I would say, for the last maybe 4 or 5 weeks at this point, and kind of everything is like good now, but like our stuff was kind of en route for over a month, so I was kind of left with, I'm trying to remember what gear I had with me. I had my laptop, obviously, and then the Digitact, and I don't even think I had any like modular stuff. It was like one of those, like, I don't know if, and maybe you've experienced this like while moving, because like obviously I'm looking at your studio. It's like you got some toys and stuff, and it's like obviously as a music producer, you love having things to play with and to be able to like mess with. But then when you're kind of left where you only have like 1 or 2 things, at first for me, my brain goes to, it's like, oh man, I wish I had this thing with me, or I wish I had this thing with me. But then if you kind of stick with it long enough, you start to find ways to kind of work around with what you just have. And that kind of reminds me of like starting out, like making music or like using Ableton for the first time and not really having any gear and kind of getting in that mindset of being like, okay, like I only have this and that. What can I do? And what can I like actually like achieve with that? So anyways, long story short, Austin's great. Having a blast out here. It's nice and hot and humid. That's a big thing for me personally.
You love that. You love the humidity? Really?
I live for it.
Really? Well, I mean, you and I both lived in Indiana. And so, I mean, we were used to that growing up. It's like breathing water. Austin is probably even more so.
Yeah.
It's insane. I went to Austin once in July, like 3 years ago, and I couldn't breathe. It was insane. I like the dry heat, so I'll probably stay here for a long time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, to each their own. Too, it kind of sucks that we left Denver this time of year, because this time of year is like, I mean, it's so nice out there during the summer. It's just like the most beautiful, usually pretty mild. I'm sure it's probably been kind of warm out there. But
it's been hot, man. 90s every day. Yeah, as long as you're in the shade, though, you're good. Think about like Austin or humidity it doesn't matter where you go. If you're outside, shade or no shade, you're breathing water. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, we just I just installed, you can get on Amazon for like $20 these little like misting systems.
Oh.
So it's like this like line that you run, and then you kind of just cut where you want the actual like misters to be, and then attach it to a hose, and you just hang it up high, and so then you can like be laying outside or like lounging out there, and it's like when there's a nice breeze, it's like you get hot just like from the sun and everything, but then you get that nice breeze.
Nice. It's kind of like at an amusement park when you're standing in line. They got those little mister things, but you can put that on your patio. That's nice.
Yeah, that's a game changer out here, man. Because it's been, I know it's been hot in Denver, but it's been like upwards of like 105.
It's a different level. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love it.
Get that sunscreen out. Turn into a lobster. What was a big motivation behind the move? Like, your friends out there, you just loved Austin, or?
It's kind of a complicated and long story. Basically, my wife and I were trying to buy a house out in Denver, and this would have been end of last year into the beginning of this year, basically up until like April, which is when we started to kind of look into Austin. And the housing market there, I've heard it's cooled down a little bit now, but it was just like insane. We couldn't really find anything in Denver, so we started to look in Colorado Springs. And basically so like a house would list for like 500,000, say, and basically every offer that would be put in would be over. That was kind of how like everything was happening. So then some houses, like say a house was up for, asking price 500,000, was going for like 725, like sometimes. Like it was just like it was insane. So then we were kind of trying to figure out what we wanted to do. And for me personally, and maybe, I don't know, you're in Denver now, and clearly you're a stronger man than me, but I'm at the point where winters, I just can't. I can't do the winter.
No,
I really don't.
That. Me too, man. Yeah.
It's hard for me. I like to be like outside and, like doing stuff, or even just like hanging out outside. I don't like being like stuck in the house half the time of the year, which it's odd because it's like, it's kind of flipped here in Austin, where it's so hot during the summer that this is kind of like the winter time. At least it was before I got that mister, because now it's like, I go outside whenever I want. It's all good.
Yeah, that's nice.
I've kind of always wanted to live in Texas because it's one of the few like kind of destination states or places that I like haven't lived yet. And that's not like a flex or anything. It's just I've moved around like a lot and always enjoy like going to new places and, just seeing what each little city or town has to offer. So we somehow came to an agreement to, try it out. And we have a lot of friends out here, a lot of like which I'm sure we'll get to. So my wife also works for Field Trip, which is the psychedelic meditation. It's mainly an app, but then they just started doing at-home ketamine therapy.
Yeah,
and they actually have they have clinics all around North America and Canada, which I guess is part of North America, where they do therapy. So she's been working for them for the last close to like 2 years. And then I came on probably a year ago, kind of handling all the meditation work and stuff. And basically they're kind of set up, they already have a building, but they're planning on building a clinic out here. And there's a lot of other like stuff kind of in the psychedelic space that's kind of starting to try to get going out here, which also, I mean, in Denver and Colorado, it's like there's a lot of that stuff is popping up as well.
It is. It really is. I've been hearing a ton about psychedelic therapy is a really hot topic these days, especially with like ketamine. I feel like it's the newest one that's showing a lot of interesting research. But I know MDMA and psilocybin are also really huge for PTSD and anxiety and depression. So that's fascinating. And
actually a lot of the people that do like the field trips therapy, most of them, I'd say a big percentage are a lot of like war vets that have kind of tried everything and just kind of can't, figure it out, or nothing works. Or if you kind of end up going to a typical doctor, then they're just going to be, kind of treating the symptoms. And then you kind of get into a whole different mess with, whatever kind of drugs they're putting you on, as opposed to basically using something that, whether it's ketamine or mushrooms or whatever, using something to like really break open your thought process. And then also, I mean, I'm not the smartest guy, but I know that when it comes to like psychedelics and whatnot, it actually has the power to like, you're able to kind of reprogram your brain and kind of introduces some of that like neuroplasty, I guess how you say it. So it's pretty cool to be a little bit a part of that stuff. And it's exciting that society is finally kind of coming around to that, and hopefully it continues to grow.
Yeah, I think that it could be really valuable, especially like you said, for people who come back, veterans who maybe have experienced some serious PTSD. I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, which he's also in Austin, but he was interviewing some doctors who were really cutting edge with MDMA and psilocybin, and talked a little bit about ketamine, but not a lot in that episode. I have to look up which episode it was, but yeah, they talked a lot about like the brain's default mode network, which is responsible for like repeating thought patterns. And so people who experience like PTSD or like depression have like these thought spirals, or are triggered by certain events. Maybe it's like 4th of July fireworks or something, whatever that is for that person. And then they have a hard time getting out of that state of that trauma and that repeating cycle thing. But some of the neural pathways that open up through these drugs like MDMA, or I think it was specifically psilocybin they were talking about, it's called like neural plasticity. It like really, it opens up new pathways in using your brain to recall memories and like be able to become vulnerable and talk about stuff that maybe would be hard to talk about, or you don't know how to talk about it, but it gives you kind of like this safe feeling to really open up and project what's going on inside, maybe when you can't, if you weren't under the influence of that substance. So that was really interesting. I have to go back and find that episode, but yeah, I learned a lot through that.
Yeah, and it's kind of to like relate it to music. It's kind of like, like in the modular world, if you have a patch set up and something just isn't sounding right, but it's like you can't remove the patch cables for some reason, like doing some sort of psychedelic therapy allows you to kind of like, set up new avenues and sort of like new pipelines and kind of change your patch cables in a way that's like actually beneficial to you, and also gives you perspective on just like seeing maybe what has happened to you in a different light and kind of reflect on it a little bit more. And I feel like that's powerful to have something that like clearly works. And also, I mean, mushrooms, it's like that's been happening since the beginning of time. Like really, I don't know if I forget the name of it, but there's a documentary. I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon Prime with Paul Stamets. It's his.
Let's see. Let's look it up. Fantastic Fungi?
Fungi, yes.
Okay, Fantastic Fungi. Yeah, I'm looking this up right now.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that.
Great ratings. Wow, it's 4.8 ratings out of 6,400 reviews. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and it kind of puts things in perspective in terms of like mushrooms just in general, like their role in the planet ecosystem, and just kind of how crazy like the earth is in general, but also it's like fungi have been here like since the beginning of time and will be here, long after us. And so it's crazy, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a plant. It's been around since as long as we know and as long as we can document. And a lot of ancient civilizations and native tribes around the world, especially in South America, I think have been using it for medicinal purposes long before a bunch of Westerners found out about it.
Yeah.
Also Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. He has an episode called Magic Mushrooms in Mexico. That was a really good one too.
Yeah. I love that show. He's such a character.
He is.
So funny, so dry, and
he's like a real life House. You ever see the show House? Where
I've only seen a little bit, but yeah, I get that.
Real sarcastic. Sure. Yeah, funny.
And it talks at the same tone the entire time.
It's true. He had just one voice, one dialect, one tone of voice, never changes.
Yeah.
And it's funny. So you're working with your wife and doing these therapies. What does it look like for you producing? I am almost kind of imagining like spa music. Like you go get a massage. Is that kind of the similar vibe? And like, how do you go about creating that kind of sound or vibe for these therapeutic sessions? Like, what's the intention? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so the way because I kind of do all the stuff for the app, or most of the stuff, but we have like partnerships with people. We actually had John Hopkins just did a bunch of stuff for the app as well. So we have some people that like we bring in their own music or they've made stuff specifically for the app. And then what my job usually is that we will get people who do meditations for us, whether they be a therapist or just somebody that we work with. So they'll send me, the recordings of their voice, and then I kind of like score that. And it's actually interesting because the process actually starts out by doing a lot of like using RX9 isotopes, RX9 to kind of clean up like audio. So it's actually been an interesting challenge for me because it's like we're focusing on bringing healing and helping people with trauma and all that. But it's like my first thing that I have to do is basically like remove all the mouth sounds. I have to like, clean up all the noise, make this like sound like as good as I can. And then I get to move to kind of the more creative bit. But yeah, it has been interesting because it's so different from like making like dance music or, something that has like a drop, anything like that. So, I mean, I feel like it was very challenging at the beginning, but more recently I've kind of been, at least from my own perspective, a little bit more like mindful of like what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And a lot of that is just kind of sitting with whatever the therapist is talking about and then sort of playing around with some sounds. And I kind of started doing this stuff at the perfect time because it was kind of right after I got like really deep into the modular stuff. And so the modular is also like a really big part of that because I'm able to sort of build up these droney soundscapes and kind of use that as like almost like an initial like atmosphere or environment to then start to kind of piece some stuff on top. But the other thing is that because it's a meditation, I feel like as the person making the music shouldn't distract from what the meditation is. It should kind of like sit in there, which is also a very like kind of tricky thing to do coming from making like dance music and like making stuff that's exciting and that people like, that's trying to grab someone's attention. So it's like you're almost kind of trying to do the opposite and like you almost don't want the people to even really notice the music, but if they notice the music, it's adding to the experience, or it's like, in the last few things that I've done, I've really started to kind of almost build these little crescendos that go with the meditation, right before you're doing some breath work or whatnot. They send me the audio file and then I kind of work with that and then start to sit with the music and
got you. Okay.
And work some
that makes
stuff
more
out.
sense. I would say that would be like real high stress for me if I was actually in the room and this person starts tripping out. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. I was imagining it like in real time. Okay. So they do the actual therapy session, and then send you the audio recording, and then you just kind of underscore it.
Yeah, underscore it, and then it goes into the app. And I mean, I definitely suggest everybody check out the Trip app. It's a good tool if you're playing around with, psychedelics, or even if you're just interested in it, because we just recently added like a chat in it, so you can actually like talk to other people, and people are sharing a lot of their like experiences, and it's just kind of a really, really neat thing, and a challenging thing too.
Is it a free app or is it paid?
Yeah.
Oh wow. That's great.
I think it's free for the most part. I know we were talking about doing a paid thing, but I'm pretty sure it's still free at this point.
Well, everybody listening, jump in on it while it's still free if you can.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that. So it's also a community too. The app is not only providing sessions that you can listen to, that's guided meditations or therapies or whatever you want to call it, but then there's also like a community of people just to hang out and talk to each other as well. I love that. That's great.
And you can also, but it has a lot to offer really if you're interested in psychedelics and whatnot. But it also allows you to kind of log your experiences. So you can write in like how you feel like at the beginning of a session, and like, if you're actually doing like a serious dose of something, you can kind of track that with the app. And then also you have all those meditations and music and stuff to, kind of help yourself like set the atmosphere. And it's cool. It's a cool
that's
thing
great
to be a part of.
Yeah, that sounds like a interesting thing to score. How long are these like droning meditation tracks that you're making? Yeah,
it depends. I think the longest thing I've done has been like 20 minutes.
It's pretty long.
But most of them are about 10-ish. Some maybe even a little bit longer than that.
Okay.
So yeah, it's interesting. But again, like with the modular, it's just been so great to really put the modular to work. And because the modular just goes anyways. It's just like kind of waiting for you to kind of like sculpt it. So it's really fun to kind of just have a reason to be building up like textures and these like sort of like atmospheres, as opposed to just like doing it and then being like, oh, okay, well, I need to like actually make some real music now,
Sounds like a very different writing style than your classic Kill Paris project. A lot less lasers and air horns maybe or anything.
Yeah. I haven't found a way to work air horns into a meditation yet. So
yeah, if you do, let me know. I'll listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I always thought like I feel like we haven't explored like the time stretched like air horn, or like almost like using like pulse stretch, to like stretch out an air horn and then maybe, I don't know, layer it and repitch to make some sort of...
Yeah, you could slow down the attack, put some reverb on it, throw in the sampler, just kind of like reverse it and use a crossfade. Maybe it wouldn't be as abrupt and make people trip out.
Yeah.
There you go.
Interesting. Interesting way to deal with trauma.
Just like subliminal air horns and like really aggressive wobbles, and you just make them really chill. Yeah, that'd be great. So let's talk about other new projects you're working on. You have the Hobbie Sound project. So it seems like you've been putting a lot more effort into teaching rather than the producing. Obviously, Kill Paris, you were doing that for a super long time. And now you're focusing, it seems like, more on this meditative production. How is Hobbie Sound going? What made you, I guess, start that in the first place?
Yeah, I think I just kind of leading up to the pandemic, I was kind of tired of touring, to be honest, and doing that whole thing. And also kind of wanted to try to kind of focus more on like YouTube stuff, and also at the same time getting into the modular, stuff. And it's like when you're working with modular, even outboard gear, it doesn't always like, you don't always end up with like having a song, but like the experience of like kind of making music from scratch, kind of without the computer, I feel like is a really fun experience to have. And it's like that to me, the best way to share that is like through a video of just being like, hey, this is like some crazy thing that I'm trying to do that's not going to end up in a song or anything, but it's like, dude, this is like, it's like a science experiment almost.
Yeah.
So I kind of just wanted to like, I mean, and it's in the name, like Hobbie Sound, like kind of like return to that idea of like just making music for the hell of it and doing the things that you used to do before you had to like think about artwork for something or like think about, you know, socials and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of been focusing more on the YouTube, and you can check that. I actually tried to look that up as I was filling out the form. But there's some, if you just search Hobbie Sound on YouTube, you'll find like some of the videos.
Yeah. I'll link it in the show notes, everybody, so you can find it there.
Yeah. And I actually just uploaded a video yesterday because before I wasn't really doing anything with Ableton like on the channel, but just over the last, I'd say like 4 months, I feel like I've come back around to where now I'm comfortable enough with all the modular stuff. And also it's like stopped growing. Like I stopped like buying modules and stuff. So it's kind of like set like in terms of like what I have in there and knowing what everything does, because that's like a whole nother, you know, sort of like rabbit hole. And I'm kind of now at the point where I'm able to like let the modular do the thing that it does, and then also use Ableton for like what it's really good at, and also kind of diving into the CV tools for having it talk to each other. And then I've kind of like gotten back to actually like making like music, and dance stuff.
Cool.
Which has been a fun process to basically go like all the way. It's almost like traveling across the uncharted waters, you know, and somehow making it back to land and being like, oh, okay. It's like, I think I know where a few things are out there now. So if we need to go back, we can, but I also know how to get back here to land. So yeah, it's been fun.
That was like the first time I took a bunch of mushrooms. I felt that same way.
Yeah, you're like, oh my God, I have no idea where I am, where I'm going.
Yeah.
I don't hate it.
Right.
It's strange. And then you sort of pull out of that and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Working on music on mushrooms is the weirdest thing. Not to be on a tangent, but like, I feel like I was one with the DAW, and I was like, I was producing some like, it was like 88 BPM house. It was weird. It was so weird.
Well, it's slower so that you can really concentrate in. You're like really like feel it.
Yeah, I was feeling it. It was weird. It was some like jungly house music. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, that's really interesting stuff as far as, you know, being able to produce different genres. I think that's a good way to stretch yourself as a musician. And you were talking about the whole minimalism side of when you were moving, you didn't have all the fancy modular gear and all the toys with you. I've talked about that in the podcast a few times, but like limited creativity, I feel like makes you more creative, if that makes sense.
So powerful.
It really is, man. And I've got lots of toys. I finally have my studio set up now in Denver, but I feel like I'm still just locked in with my push and just being in the box most of the time, because I'm just forcing myself to. And I'm finding new packs. I'm finding new workflows and toys and devices I didn't find before that I probably wouldn't have found if I was just running over to my Moog and some of my other stuff.
Yeah. I think it's so counterintuitive, and especially, you know, in today's world where it's like you have access to Splice and all this stuff. So you have basically limitless sounds, and you think that you need so many things to like make something great, but like in practice, if you really like limit yourself to like a few things that you know pretty well, like it's the that, because that gives your creative mind, like maybe this is the thing that like I don't talk about, or maybe other people don't talk about enough, is that the creative mind is actually fueled by problem solving and by having certain boundaries, to where it's like I tell people in lessons, it's like, you know, Ableton is as big as you want. It can, you know, need it to be. It's like kind of this limitless, I call it the gray ocean, the gray abyss. But it's like you kind of need to build your own like little sandbox. So you need this sort of like structure and this little like box to work within, Now you can have whatever you want in that sandbox, but you need to kind of set some parameters, whether it's like something as simple as like knowing what tempo you're working at and like what the kick drum rhythm is going to be if you're doing stuff with, with a bass drum or with drums in general. But yeah, I feel like limiting yourself in some way kind of allows you to make like important choices. Whereas if you just keep, again, floating into that abyss, like you're never going to come out of it.
I think it's a double-edged sword because it's easy to get comfortable in that too. There's like once you get there and you learn all the things, then you just have like these specific devices or toys you're playing with. You get really good at learning them. But then also I think that sometimes the best thing you could do is to push yourself into uncharted territory as well and force yourself to grow. Because when something's really hard, I feel like is when you grow the most. So if you if you force yourself and you force your body to do things that it doesn't necessarily want to do because it's uncomfortable and it's new and it's hard to learn or do, then I feel like it forces you to become better. And you're going to learn. It's going to actually expand your capacity to do more in the future as well. Obviously, not just because you learned it, but because you're training your body to say, this is hard, but I'm going to put into practice necessary. And that's just going to exponentially grow. Yeah. I don't know. I've heard that. I actually listened to that recently on the Joe Rogan podcast. He was talking with Theo Vaughn. They went deep into that rabbit hole, and I was like, yeah, I need to learn some. I'm gonna go learn.
Yeah. No, it's so true because it's like even if I think what kind of what trips me up, and maybe this trips other people up too, is like sometimes you think too much about like the end goal and achieving that end goal when you do kind of like push yourself or you think about pushing yourself. You're like, well, I don't know. It's like kind of like out there. So I don't know if I want to like risk, trying something that's that hard. But even like as you kind of get into the process of doing something you're uncomfortable with, the goal kind of becomes less important because you start to kind of learn things along the way, either about yourself or just kind of new techniques, especially with music. It's like if you try something that's way out of your wheelhouse, like even if you don't achieve what you thought you were going to achieve, by the time you get to that end place where the goal is, you're a different person at that point. So it's like the goal maybe doesn't even make sense by the time you get there because you're like, well, that goal is kind of stupid. It doesn't really relate to what I actually learned by doing the process because these are all the things that I didn't know before I started that. So I think that, I think that happens a lot in music. I think it can happen a lot in music and
absolutely.
And like you said, challenging yourself. And I think one thing I think about a lot or have been doing recently is challenging myself by not doing more, but actually doing less. So kind of like a minimal mindset and really focusing in on like specific elements as opposed to just like adding a new channel and like throwing something in and then add a new channel. It's like, how do you get across like your message or what you're trying to do or the vibe with like the least amount of sounds?
I
feel like I didn't understand that for the longest time. I remember reading Future Music magazine and watching like interviews with people and like, these older like house producers or like whatever genre talking about as they get older, they enjoy more like minimal things. And I never understood that up until like maybe like 2 years ago, maybe not even, maybe a year ago. And it is interesting to really like focus in on specific elements and really give each thing the space and the time that it needs to like kind of stand up on its own. And that's like at least when I think of challenges, I think about doing so many things and so much shit, but it's really about like kind of, I don't know, really focusing in and just doing a few things really well.
Totally agree. I think less really is more in a lot of areas of production. And you're right. I've heard that too. I think Bot talked about that, house producer from LA. He's been doing it a super long time. And he talked about like, he's been producing with less tracks than he was, 5-10 years ago. Yeah, it's interesting. I listened to some of my favorite songs and they're pretty minimalistic as far as like what's going on at the same time in a track. And it was something I've still learning, but I've told my students many times is don't clog the toilet of sound, because you can just you could be like, man, this needs something, so you just keep shoving more stuff in there, and eventually it's clogged and it sounds like absolute garbage. And I think that's something every producer has been guilty of.
Yeah, well, because you always just, again, it's like Ableton, as great as it is, the problem with it is that it's not limited at all. Like, you can keep adding tracks. You can keep, there's no like guardrails, like kind of keeping you in check, saying like, hey,
yeah,
this is not the right path. Like, you're adding too many things here. There's too much shit going on. Like,
maybe someday though, maybe there will be an AI Max for Live device or something that just kind of, like Clippy. Did you ever see Clippy? Like the little clip that somebody made. And he just like pops up and he just looks at you and he's like, hey, Corey, you're going off the rails. This is sounding like garbage. You need to turn around.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good.
It's not right.
That's what we need.
One of my previous students, who's just like a really, really smart guy. He's a programmer. Him and I like meet up like every 3 months. We'll just like hang out, have a Zoom session. We end up talking for like 5 hours. And when we went to meet the last time, kind of right before we moved, we kind of both had the same idea, something we've been talking about. And that's some sort of like Max for Live device would be the way to do it, but a way to basically like almost like an XP meter, like in a video game, to where like it's tracking or it's giving you some sort of score, not really based on, it's not like telling you whether your music is good, but a way to kind of track how many hours you've put in, how many times you've done certain things, as a way, because as you know, it's like sometimes you'll be, trying to make music, or maybe not, maybe you make music and it just like works every time, but like when you spend time trying to like do stuff for like, it could even be like 2 or 3 months where it's like you don't really like finish anything, but it's like you have put in time, you've done these things. It would be nice to have some sort of a reward system set up to where you can track some of that stuff. So it's like you have, it's like open world games. Like, even though you're not like beating the game, still you have like your XP meter, like you have all these, all this loot and stuff that you've like collected. So it's like, that you've like done some shit, in the game. Like, I feel like unless you bounce something out of Ableton, there's no way to really show like, hey, I like have been like spending some time and like doing things, you know?
That's a really interesting idea. There's not much of a reward system for just finishing tracks, other than like posting it on social and then getting disappointed because not as many people liked or commented as you expect. So then you're just back to the same cycle, being like, oh crap, like now I have to go do it again without the rewards. That's a really interesting idea. Maybe you get like a free discount code on Ableton.com or something.
Yeah.
Or you get like, you could start your own crypto. Everybody's doing it these days. Start your own token, an Ableton token.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we'll go that far.
You got your programmer friend. Tell him to figure it out.
Yeah. No, we've been kind of rapping about that and trying to, sort out. It's like, how can you, especially for people that are like learning, it's like there's really, especially like you said, like the only real like reward system is kind of optimized for disappointment in terms of like actually putting your music out or throwing it up on social. So for a lot of people that are new to it, they may post something and it kind of doesn't go well for them, and that might just be the end of their creative journey, like making music. And I feel like that's
happens a lot.
Yeah, and that's sad because in retrospect, like a big part of making music and doing anything creative, I feel like there's more failures than successes.
It's true. I think so.
It's very valuable to fail, like, as well. Like, it usually sucks like at the time, but with enough space from whatever it is, it's like you usually kind of pull something out of that and are able to do something better, or just like not make the same, mistakes the next time. But then that next time happens, and then there's different mistakes, and then it's kind of this revolving, cycle that just continues. But yeah,
I fully relate to that. I remember like way back in the day finishing a song, being so excited to release it, and uploading it. It hit Spot. I think it was like the first track I ever uploaded to Spotify. I'm listening to it. I was like, this is dope. And then the song changed to another artist I really like. And it was like 10 times louder and sounded way better. I'm like, literally scared me. I'm in the car.
Yeah.
I've like cranked up loud. I think this is probably before Spotify started normalizing their stuff a lot more, but that was very disappointing. But yeah, I mean, I think the reward system could be a lot of things. You know, it would be interesting. Have you seen, not to go on a tangent, but have you seen these like workout gyms? I actually tried it for the first time. It was called Orange Theory Fitness, but there's the other ones out there. And you wear a strap on your arm and it measures your heart rate. It gives you points depending on the 5 different zones that you stay in. So you're working out in a group and you're doing all these different workouts as a group. Like I'm on the treadmill and I could see my heart rate and all my diagnostics on a TV screen in front of me with the whole class. And so it's like showing you and tracking your progress with the whole class. And then you're seeing like, oh, this is how I'm doing. Like my heart rate's too low. I need to work a little harder to stay in that zone. And it shows your color depending on how hard you're working. It'd be kind of cool to see something like that in Ableton or like in the DAW that's like showing you your mix. That would actually be really interesting. Like, hey, your bass is like stupid loud. You know what I mean? Like you have a little notification pop up or something. Or from a mixing perspective, I could totally see somebody doing something like that as like a tracker. That would be really interesting in real time as you're producing. Because sometimes as you're producing, for me anyway, it's kind of hard to judge exactly where I'm at if I don't have a reference track already there loaded, especially if I'm in the early stage of producing. I don't know. That's just an interesting idea.
Yeah, well, because I wonder if you could have it like if it has some sort of like general AI or something where it's like checking with different like popular songs like within the genre for like frequency content. You know, I feel like it would have to. There's a lot of layers to that, but.
Yeah.
Speaking of, this is probably something that you've experienced because it was something through the Certified Trainer program, but that company Lander.
Yes, they've sponsored the podcast. They're great.
Yeah, like
love Lander.
That shit is insane.
Yeah, it's good.
And it's I haven't tried it in a while. I was using it like when we first got those codes, I used it for like a while, but I know that it's like with any AI system, it's like it's always getting better and better. And I know they've added some new features, but yeah, I wonder if you could have, like, obviously you need to track like time, and maybe it's also if it could recognize like when you've finished a certain piece of it, so it's like your main drum track, and it can tell like basically when you finished it. So not only are you getting rewarded for how much time you're doing something, but you're getting rewarded for like how quickly you get something done. Like a piece of it and move on to like the next thing. Yeah,
that's key too. You could be stuck on the same thing for so long and not actually finish a song, which happens.
Yeah, just be farming Ableton coins. It's like just grabbing a weak kick drum, throwing the drum bus on it, and then turning up the boom. You're just doing that over and over for
all day, every day. That's all it is. Yeah, but you're right. Lander is actually really interesting. I use them for my newest EP for mastering. My Alien Friends EP I just dropped a couple weeks ago. And it was a combination of me not wanting to master it myself because I was getting ready to move and I was busy. They have a referencing tool so you can upload a song that you want it to sound similar to. And I found it did a really good job. It has like modes where a couple different settings you can just upload it as it is and it masters it, but I recommend using a reference track. And then I basically created a pre-master, tried to get as close as I could, and then I just took off the limiter and gave it headroom and then uploaded it to Lander. I was really impressed. My master versus Lander's, I think Lander had me beat, especially in the mid-range. Like the mid-range is like where it really shines.
Yeah, that's a tricky spot on the old spectrum there. That mid-range.
Good old mid-range.
Going on. A lot of mystery in that mid-range, I tell you.
There really is. Yeah. It's a black hole.
Yeah.
So what about you? You talked about you're getting back into producing some more stuff. Are you going to release more as Kill Paris, or are you going to?
Think so. Or I think I'll do what I did with these 2 tracks that I put out. I think it's almost a year ago at this point. Man, time Time's weird.
It is.
These 2 tracks that I put out, like as Kill Paris, but it was Kill Paris with like featuring Hobbie Sound or something like that. I figured that that's like a good way to sort of like cross over a little bit.
Gonna feature yourself.
Yeah, just feature yourself. Like
That's
I
awesome.
think that's the move. I think that's really the only way to do it if you're trying to do a different project, but you still want to kind of carry over that.
It's a really interesting idea. I've never thought about that because that would be easy to do, like on Spotify, obviously. Just,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
So I've been I have tons of music, but it's like, again, with getting into the kind of the challenge for me was getting into the modular stuff and then figuring out how to bring sounds from that and then do kind of what I've always done, but like with these, sounds basically created outside of the box, and then also figuring out how to layer those with stuff in the box. Like that's been a whole sort of journey over the last 2 years. And I feel like I'm right at the point where it's all kind of starting to like come together, and I've figured out some things that like work. And then also, a big part of this, I'm sure you could attest to this as well, like when you're using your Moog or any outboard stuff, but like the take lanes in Ableton 11 are just
nice.
It's a beauty.
Really is. It's like Christmas every time you open up one of those take lanes.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great.
Option Command U, I believe.
Oof.
It's a whole new world. Whole new world in there.
So really kind of been putting some things together and also kind of figuring out the sound that like is me, but it's like the next like, like version. And I feel like for anybody that's been doing music for a long time and that found their sound at one point, like it's hard to like evolve that to still sound like yourself, but elevated or like slightly different or like just like newer. And I think especially for people starting out, like I feel like it's really, really hard if you're using splice samples and you're using other people's shit, basically.
Yeah.
Or you just have 1,000 different VST, synth plugins, or you're always using like something different. It's very hard to keep a consistent sound. But I feel like I'm kind of like there. And yeah, so there's like 2 songs in particular that I feel like are like something. But that being said, I have probably 30 finished tracks that may never see the light of day because they're just...
They need to see the light, man. People want to see them, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's just weird, isn't it? It's weird.
I think part of the problem is you hear it so much in captivity, isolated in a black hole, like just dark cave, and you hear the same thing over and over and over and over, and then you don't even know what's up or down, and you're like questioning the meaning of life or questioning the meaning of the tracks and your life. And you're trying to figure out, okay, do I release this? Do I not? I mean, you've got a great support group of people. And I mean, you know what you're doing. You've been doing it longer than I have as far as releasing music. But in the end of the day, I'm sure there's a few more gems in those 30 tracks than maybe you realize.
Yeah, it's just tough. And that's something about like, specifically doing like the modular stuff. It's like you're working with so many different tones and textures and different like sounds that sometimes like I'll make something that's like really cool. And like there's this like sort of like acid big room house song that I like made that like doesn't sound like me at all, but it's like kind of sick, but it's like, it can't really be like a Kill Paris track. But then, like if I ever do, do shows again, it is fun to have like a bunch of like unreleased stuff that is made that I know like kind of like works like in that, like in like a live setting.
Yeah.
But also it's just fun, just so grateful for the act of like making music and like being able to create these little like sonic worlds. And it's been a big focus of doing like the modular stuff is like, and I think I may have talked about this the last time that we talked, but I really realized the importance of a kick drum and like how important that is to have with basically if you have that 4 on the floor kick drum anywhere from 120 to like 130 BPM, it's like a clothes hanger or something. It's like you can put anything on there and it's going to stand up, Yeah. And that was like going back to the minimalism thing. I didn't really realize how structurally and foundationally important like that just straight up kick drum is.
Especially in house music, because the kick drum is like part of the bass line, really.
Yeah.
It's that fundamental low frequency that you can just feel in your chest, you know, at the big show. The speakers are just punching you. And then you got the bass kind of floating in between it, really. So
yeah. And that, I mean, I went down a real rabbit hole of early house stuff, acid house, and then say the last 2 years I've been just digging so hard on like all the Afro house stuff. It's just I just love that stuff, and I've come to really appreciate, you know, house music in general, but like how you can kind of build, you know, again, if you have that solid like kick drum and like some simple percussion on top, it's like you're almost already halfway there. And then because you're locked in at 120 or whatever it is, like there's only so much that you can do with like the bass and keys around that. So then you got to figure out how to kind of groove, like you said, groove like in between those kick drum notes. And I don't know, that I've been geeking out so hard on that for like the last year, and just like being obsessed with bass lines, and really simple bass lines, but they just like, they move and they kind of have a rolling rhythm to them.
They're pumping.
Yeah.
I love a good pumping bass line.
Man, I don't know. It's
the best.
It's been a crazy pandemic, like obviously, just like kind of being left to our own devices. But I feel like it's been so fun to really dive into like, okay, why do people like house music? Or what is it that is like so universal about that 4 on the floor kick? And once you have that foundation, you can just throw anything on top of it. And even like listening to a lot of like Berlin techno, it's like the kick drum is kind of the song.
Yeah.
And then there's other things happening, but it's done in such a mindful and minimal way that's just like, it's kind of like mind blowing. And I feel I didn't understand that stuff for like the longest time, even being in the electronic scene. But again, kind of to go back to basics and focus in on that stuff. It's like, man.
I totally agree with that. I used to be, maybe pretentious isn't the right word, but I used to think like, oh yeah, that like tech house stuff is so easy to make. But then it's like,
not.
Really not. Because I started trying to make some, and I was like, you know, like the slow build and soundscaping of all these different textures moving in and out of each other is really its own art form. It really is.
And it's that balance, again, to go back to what we were talking about, you know, limiting yourself for creativity. I feel like that's a lot of really good, like house or really good, like techno. Like it is very kind of controlled in terms of like what the elements are, but each one of those elements will evolve in some way, or when one thing's not evolving, something else is. In the, you know, that offbeat hi-hat comes in at just the right time to like up the ante and keep that energy like moving. And
yeah,
I don't know, it's been very interesting to really kind of focus in on that stuff and pay attention more. Really do like almost like ear training, but for like where everything sits and why something feels as good as it does as a whole piece, you know, and what those elements are. And
yeah, getting a cohesive sound in your mix can be a real struggle.
Yeah.
Especially when you start introducing different like splice samples like you were talking about, because it's something that's created in a specific space or has a certain reverb attached to it, but maybe isn't cohesive with the reverb or the space that was created with like your own analog audio. Just kind of finding that happy place. I usually have like a dedicated return track just for one room that everything goes in, even if it's just like a super tiny amount for that purpose. Yeah. You talked about like sidechaining in your bass. I'm kind of curious, what sidechain compressor do you use, or what do you use for your sidechaining?
I use the very famous and rare compressor in Ableton.
Do you use the 8 compressor? The OG, the old school like Ableton Live 8 compressor? Because that's like a real thing. I mean, have you heard about this great debate between the 8 compressor and like the Live 10 and 11's compressor for sidechaining? Apparently, the way that it's set up, I can't speak super intelligently on this, but I do know that there's the FF1 setting in the Ableton Live 8 compressor, which is their fast forward modeling, and it helps with some of the pops and clicks. I don't know all of the tech under the hood of what's going on in that device. Also, checking out your attack and release times can make a difference, obviously, with any pops or clicks when sidechaining. The look ahead makes a difference as well if you change it to like 1 or 10 milliseconds. And there's a Mr. Bill video that was really good. I recommend checking out the comments. It's called Mr. Bill Ableton Tutorial 58 Solutions for the Sidechain Click Problem. Check out the comments. Marco, I don't know how to pronounce his name, the top comments, but he talks about at the very end of your kick track, you can, or whatever you're sidechaining, just put an empty audio effects rack, make 2 chains. One's an empty chain. The other one is a compressor with like the threshold, ratio, release all the way down. And then just set the attack so the click can pass through, and then you route that chain through every compressor you need. Because as many of you know out there, if you're playing with the attack on a compressor, depending on where it's dialed in, sometimes you can get a little little blip. And Live 8 compressor doesn't really do that.
So anytime that I experience that, my little hack for that is that because I'm always sidechaining on a group, so it'd be like I have like the main, like the bass group that has like the sub and then whatever bass elements are happening, synths, leads, and all that.
Me too.
So if it's a specific sound within that that's kind of that's clicking, I then just use the track delay on the right and push it forward or back, like, because especially if you have like an attack sound, like in like a bass sound or kind of like a donkey bass or something like that, like if you just slide it, so basically the compressor is kind of ducking right before you get that attack, then you can just, you got no issues.
Yeah. I find that that's a great tip, using the track delay for sure.
I mean, it's great for tons of stuff too, just for sliding things a little bit.
Making things groove a little bit. I've done it with like shakers and stuff.
Oh yeah. Just while we're on track delay real quick. So UAD makes it's like the EP30 or whatever.
34. The tape delay?
Yeah. So what's fun to do with that is that if you turn, basically the delay rate, I think the lowest it goes is like 20 milliseconds or like 30 milliseconds. Maybe it's 60 actually. I don't remember.
80.
Okay, so it's on 80. So what you can do is you can basically turn the dry wet all the way up, turn that delay time as low as it goes to 80, and then use the track delay to basically go negative 80. And then you get like it's in time, but you're basically just using it as if it's like a saturator or something. You don't have the delay time, the delay feedback up at all. You have that at 0, so you're just using it as like a little, like it kind of sounds like a saturator or something.
Love that. That's pretty cool. I've done a similar thing using Echo. If you just drive the input really hard and then turn down the time all the way, it's nice.
While you're on Echo, so I had mentioned this to you through email, but I worked in Colorado Springs in May, right before we moved, with this performing arts group, and they're the main woman, Nora Chipamir, I think is how you pronounce her name.
Okay.
And her and this troupe, like everybody is basically from Zimbabwe, and they're doing this. Like the full show is like a 5-hour long opera, but it's like not a traditional opera. There's a lot of like native African drumming and chanting. And
is it still happening right now, or this was in the past?
The next the show is called Nihanda. I think it's Nehanda. I can send you the the links and everything. Especially Nora has there's like a profile in her like agency that does bookings for her or something. She's a very, very interesting person.
Huh.
But I kind of worked as their like Ableton guy, so they're doing all this like live performance thing. We didn't even do the entire show. We ended up doing it was like 2.5 hours of the the full 5-hour performance. But the setup basically was I was doing kind of backing tracks of stuff that they had put together, but then they had a drummer who was doing like all these hand drums, and then he had this crazy like drum set that had like, it wasn't like a traditional drum set. It like had like all these like cowbells and like weird things on it. Yeah. So I had a mic on him that was then going into Ableton, and then I was doing like live effects and stuff and kind of just like adding to the overall like atmosphere. But I kind of stumbled upon this like weird thing that was really, really fun to do. Basically you have the echo and you run, whatever sound you have like going through that, and you're playing with the feedback. You turn it off of sync, and then you're running it, just in like free mode and, adjusting that. But then you have the resonator after the echo, and you have that pitch to whatever chord you want. And then you just wail on that echo with turning that feedback up to 150 and then messing with the delay time.
Okay.
And it's a very, very interesting sound. It like really
love that. Wait, this is spectral resonator or just the resonator's device, the OG?
You can use the spectral resonator as well, but that the regular resonator where you can like dial in, basically the different pitches and the sort of chord thing. I had so much fun with that. Like,
I haven't played with the resonator's device that much, but
me either until then. I didn't at all.
I'm going to pull it out and dust it off and play with it later today.
Yeah, and that actually like led me in the modular world for any of you guys that are into the modular stuff. So there's a module called Rings from Mutable Instruments, which is a very popular like synthetic like string oscillator essentially, but it's also a resonator. So you have an input on it, and then it has like the output of it. It does like odd and even harmonics. So you can put, each of those left and right into a delay or something, or into like, whatever you want. But then if you run like drum sounds like through the resonator and then kind of play with the dampening and the brightness, because you can kind of dial in like the pitch of what the pitch will be of that sound coming out. But it's like you're running these like real percussive sounds into it, and you get this, it's just like a cool like tone, like almost like a talking drum type.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You should just sample that.
Yeah, I know, I have too. Maybe I run that through Rings as well.
There's a lot of wild modules out there. I saw you posted recently, I think it was on Instagram, the Teenage Engineering, I think it's the PO133. It's like it's a Street Fighter.
Yeah.
One. Yeah, it's modeling like the Street Fighter video game. It's a pocket operator or whatever.
Yeah. So that one is the sampler. The 33 was the original sampler. So it's basically the exact same thing, except it comes loaded with like Street Fighter sounds, and then it has like Street Fighter graphics on it, like Ryu and Chun-Li are on there, I believe.
It's awesome.
But yeah, dude, those pocket operators are
wild. They make crazy sounds.
Dude, especially one of my students actually gave me the baseline pocket operator, and he said he got it from some weird dude who said it was like haunted or some shit. There's just a weird backstory to this. But that baseline one is like, dude, it's sick. I mean, all of them are pretty sick. The Tonic drum machine one, it's like a drum synthesizer that actually links up to it's the same company that makes Synplant, which is a really interesting like organic like the oscillator plugin. I don't really know how to describe it, but they make some drum plugin as well that it's all like synthesized drum samples, and if you have that plugin, which I don't, but you can basically build kits on that and then transfer it to the pocket operator.
Oh, and take it with you.
Yeah, take it with you, and you still have control over, like pitch and like tone of each one of the sounds. But that little,
so it's basically a sampler, really.
What's a drum? It's like a drum synthesizer,
right? With the sounds imported from the computer, and you can take with you. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that thing is sick too. Just to be able to like pull up a kick drum while you're like jamming with,
Yeah.
the friggin' microKORG,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I was doing some research on that Street Fighter Pocket Operator because I thought that looked kind of fun. Have you played with any of the like arcade game packs by Ableton? There's some fun, weird ones in there, like Bit Crate by 8-Bit Bandit. It was kind of a fun one. It's like all 8-bit sounds, like old school video game kind of sounds. There's
That's awesome.
Retro Computers by Pure Magnetic, Magnetic with a K. That one's also really fun. I think it's a paid pack. The other one's free. Yeah, some fun like sampled old Atari video games in there.
Yeah, I'm always blown away by all the Ableton packs that they offer, and especially now that it's nestled in your, the Ableton browser where you can see like all the packs that you have available, and stuff. Like I'm just mind blown by how many things are in there. And I don't know if this was a free one, but the Spitfire upright piano
sounds great, right?
Dude, it's like a go-to for me for just pulling up a piano sound and layering some other stuff on top of it. Like I'm just dumbfounded with how many I know both of you and I are certified trainers, so it sounds like we're shills here, but it's like, it's just insane.
Up. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's overwhelming because we have access to all the packs. And so there's so many. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to get through all of them.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've like freaked out because I get like an email that says like, thank you for your purchase.
I know, me
and
too.
I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, what the fuck? And then I like look at it and it's like 50 packs. And I'm like, what? I didn't buy these. And then it shows the total at the bottom, 0.00. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I know. It's like, did somebody steal my credit card? Like, first time I got that email. And even still, like, sometimes they'll just be like a little stoned laying in bed going through emails. I'm like, I didn't buy anything from Ableton. And then
what the fuck, Ableton?
It's taking my money? No. That's funny, though. Yeah, every time the new pack comes out, it looks like we're getting charged, but it's just free shit. So thanks, Ableton. We love you.
Yeah. Have you messed around with any of the Reason stuff? Now that Reason is a VST?
It's been on my to-do list, and it keeps getting pushed down into the archives, but I would love to play with some Reason, and I know it's a VST, and it's free, right? I think it's free.
I don't think so.
Maybe
pretty sure
not.
You need at least to get access to all the like the player plugins and the synths, you need like the Reason Plus. The only reason I got on that like last year around like Christmas, because they were doing like a Black Friday thing. It was like half. You pay for a year and it was like half. And that was right when they had released the baseline generator little like MIDI plugin thing. But dude, I've been using that stuff like all over the place, all their MIDI effects and stuff. And they just came out with the chord sequencer is what it's called, which is really, it's kind of like a Cthulhu type situation, but
that's
a little bit more user friendly and actually less chords, like for each one of the presets, if you will, or like sets. It's like 16 chords in each one, but yeah, that stuff is Reason's crushing it.
I need to check that out. I heard Mr. Bill talking about that recently on the podcast with somebody, I forget who it was, but they were hardcore reasoners.
Did you ever use it back in the day?
No, I really never did.
Oh man.
No, I was using Pro Tools and Logic, and
poor soul.
Yeah, I know. It's sad, really. No, I do love Logic still, though. I still have a love for Logic, but I haven't played with Reason. And everybody I know that has come from Reason really loves the stock plugins. That's like a big thing. So,
yeah, they're sick. I used Reason on version 3 back in the day.
Wow.
Like that was
the
kind
legacy.
of it was like kind of my first like. I mean, I don't know. I used like Sony Acid Pro. That was kind of the first thing I ever messed with. And then it was like Fruity Loops when Fruity Loops was still Fruity Loops. And then I used Reason 3 and 4 before finding like Ableton. And like back in the day, if you wanted to use both Reason and Ableton, you had to do at least on Mac, so smart and just great. Cause yeah, like their built-in plugins, like the Thor synth, like that was, I remember just like my mind being blown when that was like released in Reason 4 or whatever. Cause it's like this like cyberpunk lime green, and like the initial patch in it is this like total like Daft Punk like talky bass.
It just looks inspiring
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
so much
that's
fun.
important.
Yeah, definitely check out the whole plugin situation with Reason.
I'm gonna download that tonight.
And speaking of, last thing on that, the vocoder that they came out with a few months ago, like the BXV or something like that, is, to me, I've been looking for the longest time, like I'd say my entire career, for a really good vocoder.
Have you played with Vocal Synth 2 by Isotope?
I don't know if it was the second one or the first one.
Not a fan of the first one. Oh.
See, I wonder which one.
The second one is different. I like the second one a lot more. I think it sounds better. I think the options in the interface and even the presets are way better. Vocal Synth 1 was kind of okay, and then they upgraded, and it's like now my baby. I use it for all my vocoding needs. Anyway, go ahead.
I would assume, like, because like I said, when I started doing this this meditation work, one of the first things that I like kind of hunkered down on was getting RX9, and I've been completely blown away with how powerful that is for audio restoration, and
it is
all kinds of stuff. So I mean, and also I've been using Ozone for the longest time, but I would assume that whatever the latest vocal synth they have is great, and I'll definitely like look into that. But that being said, this Reason vocoder to me is just like so good.
I'll check that out. It's the BXV, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
That's it. It's great.
I need to play with this. Yeah, more toys, man. I love it. Thank you for sharing. This is why I do this podcast, so I can go out and buy things that I don't necessarily need, but I want, and play with them, or get NFRs.
Like you were saying before about like, you have the specific things that you kind of do every time, or you have your kind of like set up like tools that you use and that you're proficient at, but you need a little, you need some like coriander in there. You need some like weird spices that you've never worked with before every once in a while, just to like kind of change up it doesn't completely bulldoze your workflow, especially with something as simple as like a vocoder, but it's going to add something else to it. And one thing, and this, there's a song that I did a few months ago. It was the first time using that vocoder. I'm sure you've had this same experience when you like use something for the first time and you just like immediately find inspiration, and then before you know it, you've like finished a song. Like that's exactly what happened with that, the Reason vocoder. And I did this, I think maybe I've done it in songs before, but it's just really fun to do, where you have some chords that are going through the vocoder, but instead of like singing or doing a voice thing, you do like a percussion thing, like with your mouth, like a, but you're doing the chords. So it's like, it gives this interesting like texture that like sounds like a synth, but it's like not quite a synth, and it's like rhythmic, because then you can kind of like warp the, the transients of what you did with your voice and stuff. And so I don't know. I've had a lot of fun with that vocoder.
Yeah. I mean, I like anything that just makes garbage audio sound better.
Yeah.
Really, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's what we're all looking for.
We're all looking for just those magic buttons. Yeah, there's a library in Arcade. I don't know if you played much with Output's Arcade plugin. It feels like cheating. It really feels like cheating. It's a sampler. You just hold down one note and it plays like a 4-bar loop, pretty much. And yeah, it's really fun. You should really try it. It's the only thing is it's a subscription. You can't actually own it. We did a giveaway. We gave away your subscription for a recent giveaway contest thing that we hosted. Everybody out there, if you entered, already announced the winner. Sorry. but
You lost.
enter next time maybe. But yeah, it was great, man. That's a great company. I love Output by Arcade, and there is a library in there called, well, Hooked is a really good one for vocals. It's kind of fun. It's like vocal chops and phrases. And then there's one called, oh, I'm gonna blank it right now. Damn it, I knew it. I'm gonna have to pull it up because it's gonna kill me. If you're looking for like percussion blips and bloops, and you're looking for like a 4-bar thing you could chop up or resample, it's like replaced all of my hi-hats pretty much, especially if you're into experimental music or whatever. If you go into Arcade, it's called Instead of Hi-Hats. Imagine that. That's I couldn't remember the name. Yeah, Instead of Hi-Hats is what it's called. And there's just like a ton of different fun sounds in this thing. It's crazy. They all sound ridiculous.
You know what's funny? Just is that because I just went to their website and I'm like seeing, it's like people using their plugins. Like, who would have thought that the sausage fattener interface from Data Life would have such a huge impact on the future of plugin design?
It's true.
Because I feel like that was the first one that was like, okay, you got 2 knobs here, and one of those knobs is the output level. Like,
and you wanted to make them angry too, so you just saturate the crap out of everything.
Yeah. Like, I love having that like duality of like, if you want to really get nitty gritty, with whatever it is you're processing and shit, like that's always like possible. But I also like seeing some of these interface designs for plugins and whatnot be like, no, this is like, looks like something like fun to like jump into. It's kind of like the same like in the modular world. I'm sure some of the listeners will be familiar with the company Make Noise, but the way that they design their panels, and Tony mostly, the guy who started the company, the way he goes about designing his panels and the way things look, it's like you either kind of love it or hate it. But if you love it, it's like, it just feels like you're using something from a different time, like some sort of like artifact from like, the Mayan culture or something from the Egyptians, that like some crazy synthesizer that we didn't know existed.
Yeah. No, it's true, man. The interface design has come a long way, and people are getting really creative. Have you heard of Thickify? It's by Rocket Powered Sound. It's a smaller company. I think it's just like a couple of people that run it. But they release tons of serum packs. That's like kind of their thing. But they created a pretty good distortion one. It reminds me a lot of Sausage Fattener. It's called Thickify. It's this like skinny, lanky little blue guy, and you like turn it up, and he gets like real muscly and strong. He gets like all swole and ripped, and then you can stress him out too, and he gets angry.
Wow, that's great.
It's a fun one. Yeah, Thickify. Sounds good
beautiful.
Too. Yeah,
I'll check that out. I'm sure we're coming close to the end. But I wanted to kind of tag up on the Soothe thing, as I'm sure, are they still a sponsor of the show?
Yeah, they sponsored a couple episodes. Went pretty well. I love Oeksound and Soothe too. Yeah, I hooked you up with that NFR.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thanks for joining the podcast. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great having you.
Well, like I probably said in the last podcast, I've been using the first Soothe almost like saved my life. I could kind of put it that way. Like it's been such an integral part to any sort of production that I do, because it just helps me out with those like high. I mean, I sound like I'm doing an ad for them. I'm not. I'm just. It's such
They're
a great
sponsoring this episode. Just so
yeah,
you know.
yeah, exactly. So, but it's like one of those plugins. It's like it's a very boring thing to spend money on, because it's actually not even adding anything. It's taking things away from your mix, but it's like taking away that, depending on how you use it, that like high end frequency, that like whistly type stuff, which I've always kind of been challenged with, and trying to get things like that. What I love about it is that you can like, if you do it before you distort or saturate something, you can really like kind of soften what you're going to be distorting, so you kind of like smooth out like what's gonna have harmonics added to it. And I feel like it's so useful for that, but it's so useful for so many things.
I agree.
But like within the last year, I don't even know why I did this, but what I've been doing is like So like, like in certain, I mean, I don't know what genre this would be most common in, but sometimes you'll hear like there'll be like a build up, and then when the drop comes and for the first, 4 bars or whatever, it's almost, you almost do like an EQ'd out like version of what the drop is. So it's like, a high pass, maybe a little low pass on there. So it's kind of cutting out some of the highs, and then it kind of hits in and you hear everything.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing is instead of using an EQ for that, I'll take Soothe. Well, I'll do, this is the order of the chain from left to right. I'll do an EQ that's cutting out some of the lows and kind of maybe touching I don't know if it's actually touching the highs. And then I'll do a flanger, like the MXR UAD flanger, so that it's kind of modulating a little bit, and then do Soothe, but then crank up the settings as high as they go. So it's like basically reducing it down to this weird, like it sounds like it's something that's been resampled, or just like, like an old like record that kind of has like a wet blanket on it. Okay, so then Soothe is at the end, and it's max settings cranked up. It's cutting out like a lot of frequencies, but then because you think, even if you don't have the flanger, it kind of still does this effect, but because you have the flanger, some of those resonant frequencies are kind of shifting. So then Soothe is kind of constantly trying to like duck that stuff out.
Yeah.
So you get this very strange, I hate to use the term lo-fi, but just this different texture of what it is.
Sure.
And so I sample that, and then I'll use that for like the pre-drop or whatever, or even just like chop that up to do for like little fills. Because then you sampled that, that's on its own channel, and then you have the audio file of that like weird soothed out thing. If you then go and like process that, like do some saturation, or even, what I love to do is turn it on the warping to the beats mode, and then just go off of the transients to make these little like percussive, things, or even stretch stuff out like in transient mode, and you start to get like just interesting rhythmic things. But I've been doing that like a lot, and it's like, it's so much fun to basically abuse Soothe and be left with just these, it's just weird because you'll completely lose like certain sounds, but then you hear things that are kind of trying to come back up. And I feel like if you're doing that right before a drop, and that thing that you've sampled through Soothe is what's happening in the drop, like it just gives you a different texture than if you were to just like do like an EQ thing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for anybody who might be a little lost, who has never heard of Soothe, it's basically just like a reactive EQ that just removes harshness from any sound source you throw it on. So think of it kind of like an EQ on steroids, a dynamic EQ basically happening across whatever spectrum you set it to. If you crank up that knob and smash it, you're completely reducing any of the loudest frequencies in that spectrum. So it would definitely shape the sound, and then resampling it and then processing it again. That's also a great way to like really equalize the spectrum of audio from whatever you set it to, because you said you saturate it again. So if you're resampling something that's been soothed really hard, then you add some saturation, you're kind of like compressing and flatlining that spectrum of sound into like almost like a block, really.
Yeah. So, and you're artificially like reintroducing some of those like frequencies or harmonics that were otherwise kind of, as you said, like soothed out.
Interesting. I'll have to play with that. I've been resampling more now than I think I ever have.
It's fun.
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's forcing yourself to commit to something.
Yeah.
And also keeping your computer from crying a lot if you have plugins that just keep stacking up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. I love Soothe too. I like to compare like producing with cooking a lot when I'm teaching. And I think Soothe is kind of like an air fryer.
Yes.
Because an air fryer like evenly cooks stuff like from 360 degrees, right? So you throw in some chicken breast, marinated, dude, it perfectly cook it all the way inside and out. And that's kind of what Soothe does. It's like an EQ in an air fryer. I feel like that's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah. And for me personally, it's like I will do, even I usually use EQ8, as like kind of weird as that is to say, but I'll use EQ8 to cut out the lows of most sounds. And then I usually don't even really find myself doing much like EQ cuts. I'll just literally just use Soothe to like do my EQing for me, which I feel like EQing has always been such a kind of mystery to me. And to go back to what we talked about at the very beginning, like that, the mid frequencies, like trying to figure out what the hell's going on there and how much is enough and how much is like too much. So yeah, Soothe it's just so useful. And I saw, I don't know if you said, maybe you would already know about this, but on, I think it was during NAMM, they're like introducing like Soothe Live, I think is what it's called, which is like
I've heard of that.
Very short latency that you could use like in a live setting. Which will also be great in the studio, because I feel like that's the only thing that I don't like about using Soothe, is that there's sometimes, depending on what what your computer is set at, sometimes there's a lot of latency added with it.
I haven't noticed too much, but my computer deals with latency pretty well until I get lazy. But yeah. I feel like the latency, I haven't noticed too much on Soothe, but I'm sure it's there. I mean, there's latency in all plugins.
It's everywhere.
Really. That'll be a wild day, won't it? When we don't have to worry about that. Just zero latency. Actually, I want to share something that I don't know if I'm allowed to share or not. And I don't know if it's completely true, but I was told by the person that is the higher up who runs Mixed in Key. I'm sure you're familiar with the company.
Oh, yeah.
Met him at Loop. Really nice guy. Super cool. We were walking and talking for like 15 minutes to our destination at Loop. And he mentioned something about a government contract for zero latency over the internet with live streaming. And I was like, tell me more about this. And he didn't share a lot more details, because I don't think he was allowed to, or he didn't want to, or whatever. But apparently it is possible to have zero latency, or at least latency that is so close to zero you could barely measure it from a human perspective of noticing from your ears or eyes. So yeah, that apparently exists, and it is coming at some point, that according to him. So I haven't seen any proof of zero latency over the internet for collaboration between producers, but apparently it exists according to the government. So I don't know.
Yes, no, it does exist, and maybe this is a piece of it. But also another thing that came up at NAMM, and I think Sonic State did a pretty great video on this. So there's a company called GPU.audio, and what they're doing, and this is, to me, like I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, but this is like maybe the biggest thing to happen in audio, or that will happen, at least in our lifetime, in audio. And what they're doing with this company is it's allowing you to basically use the GPU in your computer to run plugins at basically zero latency. So instead of being bottlenecked by your CPU, you now have...
It's being offloaded on another machine, a GPU that's running it.
Yeah, in the demo, if you watch the Sonic State video, this dude's using like a $500 Lenovo laptop that has like basically the most boring specs ever, and he's able to run like because basically you have to get the developers on board to like change from what I understand, the architecture of the plugins to run on a GPU.
Yeah, you'd have to code it differently.
Yeah, but because every computer has a GPU, and when you're doing audio stuff, that GPU is not being used for anything other than showing you, the DAW screen. You now have unlocked all of this processing power, and you're not going to be limited by the CPU anymore. And then also, if you're running like if you have like an NVIDIA like GTX, 3090 Ti Founders Edition, like you would never see it wouldn't be called the CPU meter, but the GPU meter, like
You're just
I mean,
be
you'd be able to,
purring around 0, just hanging out, fluttering around 1%.
yeah, run anything, zero latency, or basically close to zero latency, because that's the other thing. Like a lot of like, as I'm sure you know, like most, I think all like machine learning and AI, it's like it's all running off of GPU chips because like, from what I understand, it's faster and you have more computing power. So yeah, GPU audio, I think that is,
Yeah, I'm checking out this website.
Insane.
It looks really interesting.
It's going to be insane.
I feel like there's going to be quite a few GPUs laying around after like crypto mining slows down. I mean, without going into that whole world, but I know GPUs are used for mining a lot with like Bitcoin and other things.
Yeah, and my experience with because I said pretty the kind of moderately heavy into like PC gaming, and also I work on a PC like with Ableton. But basically, right when the NVIDIA GTX 30 series came out, basically at the height of when crypto mining was like a big thing, but that was also right when Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 came out, which is the most. I'm sure that Elden Ring would be comparable in terms of like something like a game that's really pushing like hardware.
Yeah.
But I got really, really deep into Microsoft Flight Simulator and then basically couldn't buy a new GPU, and it sucks. But I'm looking now, the prices have gone down. I'm thinking about getting like a good one and playing some of that. So
there you go. Yeah, Flight Simulator. A lot of pilots use that, right, for training.
Dude, I played on it for probably like 2 or 3 months, and then during, I think it was like around Christmas or Thanksgiving, I did what they call like a discovery flight, which is where you like go up with you go in it's like a 2-seater airplane. I can't remember the airplane that they use, but the crazy thing is that the airplane that I flew in real life, you can fly that in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So I got to fly it like basically before I did the real flight. And then when I went up and did the real flight, like the pilot guy, I mean, I don't know if he was just being nice, but he's like, dude, you're a natural. Like, you know what you're doing. And
hey,
like you can like move. And
there you go.
Yeah, it is crazy how like realistic it is. And especially in VR, man, it's very few experiences compare to Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Yeah, that shit's going to get crazier too with the whole VR and flight simulating. Next thing you know, you're going to be like in a chair, and you're just going to have like this like sensation. You're going to plug your brain in to the VR headset,
Neuralink. It's going to be with Elon's Neuralink, I imagine.
That's right. Neuralink. He's already working on that. He's healing people already, I guess, with people who are like paralyzed, giving them the opportunity to walk by like stimulating their brain through electrodes and all kinds of sciencey stuff. I don't know. It's wild.
It's a crazy world, man.
I still don't think you could get me to plug something into my brain. It's just too close to the Matrix for me. I've seen the Matrix too many times.
Yeah, well, it is the Matrix. It already is the Matrix, kind of.
I mean, right. We might already be in the Matrix. We don't even know. It's true.
Speaking of, actually, last thing, do you watch or listen to the Lex Friedman podcast? You ever checked him out?
I know of him. I haven't listened to a lot, no, but maybe I should.
I'll find the specific episode, but this guy, pretty sure his name's
Morpheus?
Donald Hoffman.
Donald Hoffman.
Yeah, episode 293 of Lex Friedman's podcast. Donald Hoffman's also been on Sam Harris's podcast, and there's he was on, I think he might have been on Tim Ferriss's as well. But if you're interested in Matrix like sort of like theories, listen to this Donald Hoffman, and it's
okay.
It'll make you think about a few things. It's very, very interesting.
It's like one of those like mind gymnastics kind of episodes, just like playing gymnastics with your brain, just like for fun thinking.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are after listening to it, and
I'll give it a listen. I'll eat
hopefully it doesn't break you.
I'll eat some mushrooms and smoke a little Denver weed, and then I'll listen to it.
I mean, I'd just stick with the mushrooms with the way Denver's doing their weed.
Yeah, that's true too. It keeps getting stronger, man. I can't keep up with it. I have to pull back, otherwise I wouldn't get anything done. It's too much.
Yeah. It's funny when you go into the dispensary experience for for those listening, if you've never been to like an actual dispensary, I mean, I remember my first time and every time going into a dispensary, and it's so bizarre, but it's funny when you go and talk to, you know, whoever's running the counter and they're like, oh yeah, and we have this and it's infused with this and it's like this percentage, and it's always like they're always going to the max with these new weeds, and it's like you kind of get to the point where like, give me like somewhere between like the good shit and like dirt weed that I used to get in Indiana, because I need to be able to like do things and like
yes, I agree. No, you're right. I want the strain that keeps me somewhere between planet Earth and outer space. Like a happy middle in there. I don't want to go out into the atmosphere. I also want to be able to like relieve myself from a stressful day, but don't send me into the clouds. Yeah. I understand that completely. That's hilarious, man. Well, dude, where's the best place, I guess we should wrap this up. Where's the best place for people to follow you online or connect?
Well, definitely check out funthingsfunlife.com, which is like my website, like if you will, but that's where like all my lessons are done through there. You can schedule lessons / what I'm calling coaching now. I don't know if you're on that tip where you say that you do lessons and coaching, but I think that's the move.
Yeah. It's more approachable.
But so yeah, funthingsfunlife.com. And then I don't really use my Instagram at all like anymore, but I'm doing the Hobbie Sound videos on YouTube, HOBBIE sound. Definitely follow that. And yeah, I think that's kind of it.
I'm already following, and everybody listening, you should too. So be sure to cop that. I'll post all the links you just mentioned in the show notes. Yeah, man, dude, it's good to hang out with you as always. Yeah. Episode number 2. I think you're like one of maybe 2 other people I've had on the podcast twice.
Wow.
So
hell yeah.
Yeah, man.
I'll be back.
Yeah.
I'll wait for you to move to Austin, and then I'll move to the next place and be like,
hey, man.
Damn, man, just missed you. Better do a podcast.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. Yeah, every time we both move, we'll just reunite and have another podcast episode, which could very possibly be another 10 times in the next decade. Who knows? We've moved a lot.
Absolutely.
That's funny.
Absolutely.
Right on, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening. Tell your wife I said hello, and best of luck with the therapy. That's really fascinating stuff. It's really interesting.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to check out that app too when we hang up.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Anytime. Happy to support you. You make dope music and you're a good guy. So it's always a good time. I'll see you soon. Brother. Hopefully.
All right. See you, man.
Peace. Hey, big thanks to Corey for joining the podcast. Make sure you check out the links in the show notes. Give him a follow. Check back for new episodes on Tuesdays. Once again, if you would leave a good review or like and follow, I would super appreciate it. Much love to all of you out there. If you want to join the newsletter and be the first to get new episodes and cool stuff that I'm sending out into the world, then go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. Join the newsletter. I will do my best not to spam you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one. Later.